We think that electricity is one of the keys, and probably the biggest key, to reducing emissions in all the other sectors. So that was the focus of the group, right? So it's not just about how can we create more renewable electricity, because we're nearly there in the last little bit, how can we get the blood out of the stone. It was about how we can create much more electricity so that we can enable emissions reductions in other energy areas. So we went through solar, wind, geothermal, energy management, wood burners, because Molly was there, so we went through wood burners, and that was great, and how they could support solar, you know, so the summer-winter profile of solar, how you can use domestic wood burners to actually, you know, produce the heat in the winter, and still get your outputs from solar. Of course, we talked about methane from waste, and biomass energy forms. What we concluded was, and I added up by trying to get everyone to say, well, how many gigawatt hours is that? And I used sort of a benchmark for electric vehicles that it's about 20% more electricity consumption if we converted all the light vehicle fleets to electric, which is just over 8,000 gigawatt hours a year. So so what we did was we started to quantify, and we got there easily. Wind can produce an extra 8,000 gigawatt hours a year. Geothermal was about 2,600, Brian? So right, that's good. It's actually 2,628 because I had precise geothermal engineering there. Energy management, 6,000. So this is from buildings, from commercial buildings. 6,000 gigawatt hours a year. I don't know about wood burners. Molly, you didn't give us a figure.
No figure.
No figure. That's all. You don't need to give it one.
No more open cycle gas turbines needed at all.
Right. All right. That's good. There's not many left anyway.
Yeah, but they're talking about building lots more.
Good. Solar. Barbara was saying it's sort of open-ended at the moment. So we know that England's got 8,000 megawatts, and Queensland in 5 years got 1,000 megawatts. So we're probably easily going to drive our vehicles off solar, and probably a bit more. So there isn't a problem in New Zealand in having renewably generated electricity to do everything else that you guys came up with. And that's including keeping Tiwai. So the question for us is, what is a barrier? What is the barrier to us actually having more? What are the barriers to us having more electricity? That's good. So I'm up to barriers now.
Just keep scrolling again.
Oh, yeah.
Get it into the terrain.
Where's the scroll?
Should float down.
Why are you stopping the flow now?
You keep going.
So there we go. So barriers. So we got then into the barriers. Now, before I go into technology, I might not have actually captured the main barrier for development of renewable energy in New Zealand is the lack of load. So now everybody's saying the uncertainty and the lack of load. It's actually the lack of load that's preventing us actually building these renewables, because they are at least either at the moment viable, or they will be viable, like solar, in the very near future. So the big issue is nobody wants it. There isn't a market for it at the moment, so we're not building it. So you guys in the other groups have to come up with ways that we can use electricity to reduce your emissions, and that's what I'm hoping to hear in the next 2 sessions. Because that's exactly, that is what we're going to need. We need more load. So the group thought about one of the opportunities is actually to bring more industries to New Zealand. The industries that want to produce their products using renewable electricity. We have one already in the smelter, but it just can't get the value. So, once there's a value there set globally for low emissions or zero emission products, then hey, we've got a market for all the renewable electricity that's just sitting in the wings waiting to happen. So that's probably the main barrier. Nobody wants to buy it.
Does that mean the price is too high?
I don't know. That's a good point. I don't know. So it may well be. But it's pretty low at the moment compared with historical levels.
Absolutely, but it's not low enough, is it?
Maybe it's the cost of transmitting it. I don't know.
We haven't gone looking for people who might want to use that
We don't sell electricity. That's right. We don't sell the product. We don't market it. That's absolutely right. Good, really good product. Drew Steen used to try and do that. I think he was out there doing it. But we've not marketed electricity here for 2 decades. So where are the big industries? Because we haven't been nurturing them. We haven't brought them here. So the first thing for our group, I think, is sort out our existing industries and where we use energy, and we've got surplus electricity. We've got enough electricity potential to be able to drive down emissions using electricity, but we've also got more to encourage more industries to come to New Zealand, which is good globally, but it's also good for our economy and for our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So it's a good thing to do. Just looking at the barriers, because I got everybody to summarise them on sheets of paper. Uncertainty of the technology is another thing. So electric vehicles, one of the biggest issues for electric vehicles is when are they going to arrive? Where can we get them? People want them. Who was it said this? Somebody said this morning, oh, my next vehicle's going to be electric. Yeah, mine is, but I'm waiting for the Porsche one to come out because I've seen that. That's stunning. So, there is a lot of us that want to buy electric vehicles. We've got 80%, I think, of our vehicles are 20 years or older. They're at 20 years, they're in the 20 years sort of thing. The cumulative age is 20 years. A hell of a lot of old vehicles. There's no some capital to write off in most of our vehicles. All we need to do, we know that it makes sense. We just need to get the vehicles. So where are they going to be built? I suggest they should be assembled in New Zealand because they're easy to put together. So there's another industry that could use a renewable electricity. Anyway, the other barriers. In the building side of it, there was definitely calls for standards, and that was at the Energy Management Conference as well, Association Conference. So standards on energy efficiency standards. The neighbours, New Zealand, was seen as being a very strong sort of enabler to overcome barriers in buildings. Creation of improved building codes, so we get much higher standard buildings. And it suggested as well that maybe executives in the public sector become responsible for the footprint of their buildings, the energy and emissions footprints, and that forms part of the bonuses. How long have I got, Ryan? Should I go?
Tidy it up as we've got
Yeah, right. Right, so there's quite a few barriers we put up there. Enablers. Aspirational targets came out as one, so we do need to actually set these goals that I've been talking about, which is what I was trying to do at the beginning, aspirational targets that we could go for. More industries, we need more people to use, more industries to use New Zealand renewable energy. Market prices that reflect environmental benefits as well, so that there is the cost of carbon in there. Community engagement came out of one group that it was seen as being very, very important to get communities involved in this. We see the local authorities involved, but probably more at a community level as well, just because they're going to be exchanging energy. More research and data and analysis. To me, I'd just go to put the bottom on it. I mean, one thing for me in an enabler is about business cases. So we've talked about that quite a lot, about having them here. And to me, if we're going to get investors, not the government, but if we're going to get investors to invest in these technologies, then there has to be a good business case. And it's got to be credible and it's got to be reliable for those investors. And I heard a lot at the Energy Management Conference about how this is happening around the world, how there are now standards in putting those business cases together so that investors in these types of projects can have confidence that they're going to deliver, particularly around energy management and those sort of things, energy efficiency. The sooner we can plug those sort of things in here and get investors invested in New Zealand, the better. I think things will accelerate. Good.
Okay, well, we'll just swap over.
Thank you, Brian. Jack Bruce from Company Coast District Council. We had this discussion going in our group around business as usual and climate change, technology change, and what we could do that would actually break out from business as usual, because business as usual is just what we're already doing, right? And then trying to also reconcile the challenge with is the thing that breaks us out from business as usual some form of government intervention that changes things, or is it people doing something unusual or unexpected that they wouldn't normally do? So we had a bit of a mixed bag because of that reason. So we did have a few things which we thought would change business as usual. And that in the transport area, for example, carbon price is very low. And you know, say we had a long discussion about Nissan Leafs, for example. So that might save you 2 tonnes of CO2 per year. So that's $30. That's not going to have a strong bearing on your investment decision. Or even $300. In fact, it would have to be much higher still for that to be decisive. So in terms of putting a price on something which is an environmental problem, it really seems that around air pollution is something which is not widely recognised in New Zealand, but is a real problem, and that diesel soot, particularly the very fine stuff, is a carcinogen, and there aren't any, unless there's intervention on the part of some agency government body to get people to start recognising the cost to the public of that pollution being produced, then nothing's going to change. But it actually could be a very powerful driver to get diesel engines out of our urban environments, and of course the alternative would be things like clean burning fuels, and particularly electricity. Also, beyond that, we're looking to the long term, and what it seemed to be the problem is that what are we all driving towards? What can we have some common agreement about what it is we're trying to achieve when there are large uncertainties as well? Like, for example, you know, we're getting constantly surprised by the way the price of batteries is dropping, for example, or we're waiting for autonomous cars to turn up and suddenly solve all these problems. So given these sort of things might happen anyway, what strategy and could possibly render particular approaches redundant? How can we act in that environment? And so we agreed that it was about having a long-term goal and vision, which was obviously around a low-carbon New Zealand, and then some things around that which shouldn't change. For example, it's pretty obvious that if you're pursuing an energy strategy and your goal is to cut emissions essentially to zero, then fossil fuels aren't going to be part of that mix, and that has to occur within the time horizon which is consistent with the Paris goals. So that's about having a flexible strategy, about having partnerships where different groups can start breaking down the silos and for example, economies of scale with purchasing vehicles. So that's potentially, that's not necessarily a regulatory requirement, but it is about different groups talking about how they can pool their resources to bring more vehicles into the country. So a vehicle choice, so Bill can get his Porsche, for example. Yeah, and also the difficulty of things changing every 3 years with a new set of politicians, and it was another thing that came out of the group was, well, can we get some consensus on this so that we're not getting this whiplash of change and change direction all the time, which reduces the certainty around investment. In the short term, we had some ideas which came out. One suggestion was the rail network is a really efficient way of moving stuff around, but is underutilised. Now, why is it underutilised if it's so inefficient? It's because well, you can't use it. I can't use it. I'm not allowed to. Then perhaps that could be opened up to more operators and a greater variety of rolling stock. Also, another point that Bill touched on before about an open and transparent business case. Case studies that actually say, well, this is actually this is the value, this is the benefit of investing in this technology. Trying to put that really good quality, trusted information out there so people understand, investors that is, what they're getting into. And also, there's for early adopters, it's a lot of pain, not necessarily for a lot of gain, apart from a pat on the back. So there was a discussion that perhaps those people that do get into the do make a bold step get some reward for doing so. Now, what form that would take, we couldn't quite get into. So anyway, that's what our group came up with. Thanks.
Okay, good. Well, the person from
range of views, and so it's quite hard to pull it all together into a consistent framework in quite like Bill's framework that he came up with in terms of opportunities and barriers, and it's quite a neat way of looking at things, and maybe it's either reclassified in that format, it might make sense as well. Just a few things that we threw up there. So first of all, measure. How do we know we're actually doing anything that's worthwhile? We haven't got an agreed language that we all talk as common about this at the moment. And certainly in business we don't necessarily or have to report in that way, so we need to agree framework. And we need to sort of educate not just business but also the wider public so we can see the benefits and it's transparent. So that's probably one of the bigger ones. Infrastructure planning. We've got an existing infrastructure based around liquid fuels. That's a massive investment over many, many years. You don't just rip that up in one day. So we need to provide an infrastructure that enables other technologies, and that's a big policy. Modal shift is, what's through to rail or other means of transport. How do we influence that? That also takes the form of infrastructure planning is in there again. That could be in the context of urban reform. We've heard quite a lot about that today. But also that's the demand management, congestion charging. That influences how people behave and how you do things. Substitution and efficiency measures, those are quick wins to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So energy efficiency, everyone can do a bit better. Certainly in my world, in transport, there's big gains to be had in terms of reducing fuel consumption. And we probably do that off our own bat. But then there's quick wins. We've got existing liquid fuels infrastructure. So biofuel substitution is an easy one to do, but what needs to happen to enable that in terms of rules and standards to permit it? We didn't really get very far with this, but there's obviously disruptive technologies that we want to enable or facilitate them to develop in their own way, not shut them out the door. And policy, the point was made, it's quite a good point, that the government values social outcomes as well as economic, and they're in a unique position in that regard. So the home insulation was a very good example of that, about the health benefits. And so the same could be said around vehicle emissions, that if there's a value given to vehicle emissions and health benefits from that, that will dictate a policy move that the industry wouldn't do on its own. So that's a very interesting way to look at life. And could New Zealand be a demo site for technologies? We have a lot of benefits in our workforce, good resources, and I'd probably think back to wave power that in Scotland, in the Shetlands, they developed a wave power generation site or technology incubator and provided plugins and 8 demonstration sites and incubated the whole wave energy industry around that. Is there an opportunity for New Zealand in that kind of space by creating an environment for the technology demonstrator site?
Yep. Okay, thanks. Okay.
Sustainable Business Network. Quite a few of the points that we came up with have been covered by the first 2 groups, so I think that's encouraging. We took a quite holistic view to what we need to do to effect this change. So we think it's essential that there's an integrated transport strategy and a vision that obviously the strategy drives towards delivery. And also the need for some integration of the delivery, the organisation that's responsible for delivery. So, for example, why is rail not part of the same organisation that manages the road system, for example? Second one is a similar one in terms of strategy of land use planning. Mentioned earlier in terms of in our group, in our transport group, about the importance of urban form and the design of urban form that really affects how we move people and products. So that's really important that we have that view. Third one is mentioned before, externalities. So we're really properly pricing in not just carbon, but the other externalities. So there might be degradation of roads from the heavy truck fleet. Is that priced adequately? The health costs, of course, have to be included in that, and that's part of that education of the co-benefits of action. Fourth one is really how we use technology to deliver on some of these things. So that might be how you can use technology to avoid the need for travel, for example, air travel. You know, the developments in digital connectivity and conferencing is a means of cutting down that air travel within New Zealand and also overseas as well. And lastly, EVs. Obviously, the graph that was put up this morning that showed the fact that half of the emissions come from the light passenger fleet, and you know we obviously need strong action in that area. So one of our specific things is really an enhanced package of measures to accelerate the uptake of EVs. And one example is you know, exploring the fee-based option, so a revenue neutral, fiscally neutral system of applying a carbon stroke energy efficiency to all vehicle purchases, so you're trying to affect that change, and the more polluting cars will pay more, and the less polluting cars will get us that was it, thank you.
Getting something from Simon. I'll keep it really quite brief. We had quite a diverse group and ended up really at quite a high-level philosophical discussion of really what was needed. So really got it down to 4 key points there. The first one really is that we, and this is New Zealand, needs to agree that it wants a low-carbon target, and that's both the society and the politicians buying into that, and that this is really something for the future generations. And you think the analogy was drawn to the power of the inflation target that's driven New Zealand for quite some number of years. And really that this will then start to initiate the behavioural changes that will be reflected in future generations. And then we heard earlier about the conversations and debates that needed to happen within the society to make this happen. Then really the next thing was really the setting of the ambitious targets that apply out of that, and then in parallel having the measuring and the reporting that would drive these changes there. And this would be done not only just at a national level but by sector, so it gives some guidance on how much each of the respective sectors need to work on. Then a plan of how you're going to get there to that target, and this should be enabling, not restrictive there, and we talked about how it would cope with technology change or society changes there, and strong message be enabling, not prescriptive, and then it needed to allow for a regional and city-wide solution, so it didn't really restrict there, and then gives the businesses the certainty to make their investment decisions. And then the shorter term there, oops, if I can move Yep. And then the shorter term really actions to influence the behaviour in the longer term there. Talked about quick wins, so things like energy efficiency, moves to public transport, changes of mode of transport there. And a specific one that came up in another group is really, can we get multinationals to come to New Zealand to test the new technologies and how they might fit to New Zealand? So, thank you.
Right, okay, so we didn't consult at all, so we just had a few big points. First of all, we thought about carbon equivalent mandatory reporting, and making it simple, clear, that sort of thing. So government parts involved, and leadership would be involved there. Technology demonstrations, another important thing. That needs to be a regional basis as well.
technology specific, and then just looking at how you can involves partnership and R&D money as well. Boilers, heat exchangers, and a general switch from coal. So there's there's a huge opportunity. We a whole range of fuels, etc., and a whole range of options. Yeah, so that just goes back. The main point there is just thinking about that switch from coal and what can do it, and make sure the information's out there. Plain English business cases. So really keen to make sure that people understand the opportunity that's there, and there just needs to be good solutions involving investors, the public, and language that the public can understand. That's the main thing. Government leadership, I mentioned that already, but it is so important in terms of making progress. One of the things we mentioned there, Treasury investment horizon needs to be lifted. So sometimes they seem to be constraining options away from renewable. And just needs to be a collaborative approach overall, more joined up approach in terms of NZ Inc. And that pure message that comes out.
Right. Take two. This will be a quick fast one.
Yes, sure will be. So we started our discussion by thinking that Simon Bridget seems quite young and he probably just needs some really good ideas. So there's the ideas that we put together. I'm not sure where we're at. Does someone take my voice? Yeah, very similar ideas that already come up. So I won't dwell on them, but we think there's some great examples of practice overseas, energy performance contracts. We'd like to see those considered and used, and perhaps find some willing partners to give those a go. The collective, working on projects together. I think it's not just about government showing leadership, it's business and local government. So let's all have a go at doing it together and learn together. Looking at how we share that risk, how we use the super fund, how we can be a bit clever about how we fund some of these things. Targets being absolutely essential, and I know a number of speakers have already said that, but certainly for us at the waterfront, setting targets really allowed us to drive the outcomes that we're seeking, so I think they're really powerful mechanisms. Setting standards for insulation, Neighbours New Zealand, for our residential as well, I think we really welcome that. The ETS, I don't understand much about this, that's what the group spoke about. Setting minimum price for carbon, limit international units, and bringing agriculture into the scheme. Evidence, and many people have spoken about that, so I don't think we need to talk too much about that. And stories, we need to get better about telling stories. So how to kind of convince people to do this stuff. They're not going to be probably swayed by some of the numbers at times, but so we need to get better at telling our stories. And we like the idea of an industrial ecology approach. How do we think of things as a system, and how can we work on like a whole area together and look for opportunities?
Okay, thanks, Viv. For those of you who are not aware, Viv has got a National Leadership Award for the energy sector from ECA a couple of weeks ago, so congratulations, Viv.
Okay, Rob Marlinson, Living Energy. We thought that we could achieve 4 million tonnes of abatement by 2030 through doing the following: a regional focus on feasibility, basically more information available for everyone. So a bit more writing, unfortunately. There's some at the table who said we've done enough writing, let's get on with projects. Better border database, so that's the, all that kind of stuff just needs more information to help this kind of happen. The big one there, long-term cross-party policy, where it's stable, consistent policy to allow investments to happen without continual flip-flopping in policy. Obviously, energy efficiency has a big role to play, and we feel that the MEPs, etc., and various sort of initiatives should be rolled out more proactively by ECA or whoever to drive energy efficiency within industry, in boilers and motors, etc. Neighbours, etc., has been talked about. And did I go? Is it my table? Yeah. Excellent. I've done everyone. Let's go. I'll buy the beers at the airport if anyone wants to share a taxi. Everyone get up. Everyone go.
Okay, it's unlike Rob to take over everyone else's business. Okay.
Right, so yeah, very quickly, hang on, sorry. We talked a bit about carbon tax, and I think what we meant by that is more transparency on carbon pricing, be it the ETS or the carbon tax itself and what that price point is. Using other things like air quality, say as a leverage point to get better uptake of renewable energy, particularly around water technology. Selling the story was a big one for us. Again, everyone's kind of talked to that already, but we need to get better at doing that. Collaboration. We had a long conversation about that and the opportunities and potentially how we can do that in the current environment. And yeah, life cycle costs, trying to get again, it kind of links into the business case, making sure that we're actually talking about life cycle costs, not just upfront costs. And we did talk a little bit about how we're training our engineers, and are we actually training them in a way that they can then engage in continuous improvement type programs. That's it.
Okay, I think we've got one last group. Number 5. This is from table 5. Simon.
I'm the only one that can understand my writing. We've already rewritten it. Have you? You want to do it? Like everyone, it's a smorgasbord. We talked about the heat, what the big opportunities were. So industrial coal was the obvious one. The answer is obvious, which is more effective use, the use of heat pumps and things like that. So that's just not looking at the straight substitution of the fuel, but look at a more effective use in the context in which it's being used. And principally also looking at wood to substitute. We also talked about methane as being something that potentially was having a larger impact than the numbers just suggested and should be in there. So those were the two big things. We talked quite a lot about the best way to intervene, which was sort of some of the stuff that came out of the Mike Underhill stuff. We the firms and the users have to have sensible incentives. The measures and business systems do need to be grounded in effectiveness and productivity. The firms need to use, and I'm not sure what BATX uses meant, but no, I'm not sure. So we also talked about local incentives and regional perspectives being important, and everyone's talked about that. Demonstrations to de-risk, everyone's talked about that. And also this consistent policy environment, it really should say systemic intervention is not particular fads, which this area is widely noted for. Okay.
Okay, congratulations to the HEAT team for getting